I just sold like an 8-figure business, and now I'm passing out fucking door hangers.
Hello. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at Max Podcasting. And you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 193, or 190 3. And today's guest is Bryan Clayton. Bryan is the co-founder and CEO of GreenPal, the super cool company that connects homeowners with lawn care professionals in their area. It's an online marketplace, and he started it after he spent years building Peachtree, which became one of the largest lawn care / landscaping businesses in the state of Tennessee. Bryan is full of gems, green gems, we'll call it. And in this episode, he talks everything from bootstrapping your business, getting customer feedback, focusing on product versus marketing versus question mark versus etc. And we even get into some Mario Kart, which is probably the most important thing out of all those. It is Bryan Clayton, aka Bryan Clayton. Gotcha there. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Bryan Clayton, the probably world's greatest expert on lawn care and landscaping and starting businesses out of those, but the CEO and co-founder of GreenPal and lots of success. That's a tongue twister. Lots of success with Peachtree before that. Bryan, thanks so much for joining. How you doing today?
Max, great to be on the show, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I mean, just the thought, I think for anybody that mowed the lawn, their lawn or anybody else's lawn growing up, just the thought of like freshly cut grass just brings out good memories of nostalgia and summertime and happiness. So it's cool you've started businesses around that. We're going to get into those today. There is one very unique and cool story that I'd love to start out with, and that involves you with McDonald's and cigarette butts. So can you share the story of how you started working with McDonald's as a client?
Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing that up. That brings back some PTSD.
Okay. And probably some Big Macs as well.
You bring up the smell of freshly cut grass. I hate that smell. I think if I never have to mow another yard in my life, I'll be happy. But I never really liked mowing yards, but I saw it as my lane to like improve my position in life, I guess. And so I started mowing yards in high school as a way to make extra cash, and it just stuck with me. I thought, man, this is great. I own my own business. I can make as much money as I want, and why doesn't everybody do this? And I just stuck with this lawn mowing business all through high school and all through college, and ended up growing one of the largest landscaping businesses in the state of Tennessee where I live. I got that business over 150 employees, over $10 million a year in revenue, and then in 2013 I sold it. But growing that business from just like me and a push mower, me knocking on people's doors, begging them to mow their yard for them, and growing it into like a commercial-based business was a little bit of an evolution. And I think if you want to scale that type of business, you have to go after the bigger contracts. You have to go after the bigger, like 6-figure and up deals for facilities maintenance. And it took me like 3 or 4 years to figure out how to do that in that business and kind of rebuild it from the inside out. And my first commercial customer was McDonald's. I actually, and I, no matter how many cold calls I did, and how many like cold visits I did, how much door knocking I did on commercial properties, I never could like cut my way in. I never could get anybody to take a chance on me. And this so happened to luck up and start mowing the residential property for a franchisor. And he owned, I think, 3 locations at the time. And every year I would beg him, like, hey, let us bid on the contract for your 3 locations. And he would say, no, we're locked in with somebody that corporate has us using, and they suck, and we don't really like them, but we have to use them. And I thought, man, I know this guy will give me a chance if I can just figure out a way to get on his radar. I don't know where I came up with this idea. I think I was eating at one of his restaurants, and I just noticed that the drive-through was filthy. Like it was full of cigarette butts and debris and like chewing gum and like this nasty stuff. And I thought, man, this is pitiful. This is one of the world's most valuable companies, and the drive-through looks awful. And then I started noticing like all McDonald's looked that way. And I thought, well, I'm gonna propose to this guy that for the same price as what he's paying now, we will detail the drive-through and we will clean up all of that stuff. Literally, like with our bare hands, pick up cigarette butts and chewing gum and trash and bubblegum wrappers.
I'm starting to gather why the your PTSD comment. It makes a lot more sense now.
Literally, man. Like and so I pitched him on this, and he thought, you know what? If you're gonna do that, knock yourself out. I'll give you a shot on one restaurant. And so every time we would like come service the property, we would on my hands and knees crawling through the drive-through, picking up cigarette butts and putting it in like a 5-gallon pail. I've probably picked up 1 million cigarette butts in my life, but it looked great when we got done. Like it looked, and we took before and after pictures. This was back in like 2002. So literally like going to Walgreens and developing pictures and mailing them to this guy with the invoice and showing him, that, hey, when you hired us to mow the yard, you didn't hire us to mow the yard. You hired us to sell more Big Macs. You hired us to sell more apple pies, because it's our belief that if the drive-through looks spotless, people will upgrade to the extra value meal. And I don't know if that was true or not. It had to be, because it looked better. And so he's like, I'd like for you to do all 3 of my locations. So we did all 3 of his locations for a couple of years, and then we proved out a track record. And then he enabled me to pitch, I guess you could say, the regional group of franchisors and corporate-owned stores. And so over a 3 or 4 year period of time, I was able to develop that into probably $500,000 a year in business, because we ended up doing every single McDonald's location within a 100-mile radius of Nashville, Tennessee, something like 150 locations. And it all started, with just figuring out a different way to sell our services and align what it is we did with what our customers' goals were. We didn't want to just be the cheapest way to get the lawn mowed. We wanted to be a solution to them increasing same-store sales. And I think it worked. And that was like a philosophy that we used to develop business for that company, and it worked.
I think so, and it's really cool hearing you talk through it, because it sounds like you're describing a metaphor of sometimes you have to do like the hard dirty work in order to see results, and like you can't get more of quote unquote dirty work than picking up millions of cigarette butts off the ground and then making it beautiful. But it was a really great differentiator for you. And if you're somebody who's a franchisee and someone's giving you a proposition that you don't even really need to consider because you got corporate things available to you, when somebody offers something that's like over the top customer service like that, I see why they jumped on you and why that blossomed into such a great customer for you. So that's really cool, and I'm sure Ronald McDonald is thankful as well.
Yeah.
Let's get to the GreenPal story. Here it's pretty cool because you've kind of fused some of your early learnings from the business world and the landscaping and lawn care, your favorite hobby of your favorite smell of all time with fresh cut grass, as well as some technology and making an app that's user friendly and connecting people together. So that's really cool in itself. To start off there, Peachtree you had sold, it was acquired by another company back in 2013. Where was your mindset around the time you're starting GreenPal? Like, were you itching to get back in the game, or like were you just kind of coasting around that time?
Yeah, it's so the first business was 15 years, just me and a push mower to me and 150 people, 90 trucks going out every day, and built a really, really good team of folks around me. And like that business was almost like my family, really. The people that worked there were as close to me as family, and so I sold it, and it was painful. It was a lot more painful than I thought it was going to be. And so I had to kind of go through almost like a melancholy period, almost like an identity crisis, because this thing that I've never had a job, never worked for anybody. Like I only ran that business, and so that was gone. And so I was like, well, who am I, and what am I here? What am I here to do? And the answer to those questions has always been my business. Like the business has been the thing that causes me to take on new challenges, have a purposeful life, to be creating something that doesn't yet exist, and developing opportunities for people that work with me on it. And that's a lot of fun, and I didn't have that anymore. And I guess, I thought my goal was to live the quote unquote good life, and I tried that for like 6 months, and I got really bored. And I thought, man, I need to start another business because that's missing, and I'm getting sloppy, I'm getting fat. There's all these other things, like these ancillary side effects from not having a mission that's hurting me.
I guess on a really personal note, do you mean actually fat, physically fat, or you mean like metaphorically?
Like like size 40 jeans.
I'm historically bad with jean size, but that helps a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's not the size you want.
Oh, God.
A size 42, 44 is where I was living. And so like the business was locking in all of these other disciplines in my life, really, like getting up early, going to the gym, doing cardio, reading books, listening to podcasts, and getting better and smarter, and being humble, and all of these like good virtues. Like the business was the forcing function behind all those things, and it wasn't there anymore. And so now I was kind of coasting, and I didn't like it. I didn't like what I was becoming. And so I thought, well, I'm going to start another business, but that first business was really, really hard. I don't want to do anything that hard again, and it was really stressful. So this time, I'm going to start an easy business. I'm going to start a software business. And it was naivete as an asset. I didn't really know what I didn't know. I thought a software business was easier because, well, why wouldn't it be easier? I don't have all this equipment, and I don't have all these employees anymore, and I don't have all these headaches. And a software business kind of solves all those things, and you just build it, and then you get rich. And that's kind of like the fantasy that a lot of people are seduced by. I sure was.
I was going to say, build it and get rich. That's a very shortened version of what it actually might be.
Yeah, it's just like The Social Network, that's a great movie, but every movie about entrepreneurialism, like the part about where they work really hard on the business and where they're like grinding is always set to like the background of like a photo montage, and it like goes by in like 2 minutes or something. What they don't show you, because it's not particularly glamorous or entertaining, is that it's really, really, really hard to get something going from scratch, and these overnight successes almost never happen. And I was seduced into the idea of building a tech business, and I had an idea that an app should exist for what I just spent 15 years doing. You should be able to pop your address in an app and hire somebody to come take care of your yard work. That didn't exist then. It exists now because we've built it, but it was a new idea. But I was validated in the idea with other apps like Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, Postmates. At the time, Instacart was just getting going. And I saw these other examples of apps making these kind of like real world chores really simple and magical. And I thought, well, somebody's going to build that, and it couldn't be that hard.
No, I mean, it's a simple movie montage. I mean, what? Yeah.
Yeah. And so recruited 2 co-founders, and we got in there and started working on it, and we were quickly confronted with the reality of how challenging not only building an app is, but building a marketplace, that connects buyers and sellers is hard. And not only this, but I didn't realize this either. There's a big difference between running like a business, like a known business, and then versus inventing something brand new from scratch that doesn't yet exist. And I guess I didn't know how hard that was either. And so all these things were like confronting me at the same time. Is that this doesn't exist. There's no roadmap for it. We have to figure it out as we go. building an app actually is hard. There's the technical execution. I didn't know how to write software at the time, and neither did my co-founders, so that was hard. The third thing is like the dynamics of a marketplace connecting buyers and sellers is a lot more challenging than it looks. And so all of these things at the same time, we were dead on arrival. We pulled our money together and paid a development shop like $150,000 to build what we thought GreenPal should be, and took them 9 months, and we released it, and it was just a total flop, and couldn't get anybody to use it. Couldn't even get my own mother to use it. And so we were like, damn, this is hard. But at the time, we were reading a book called The Startup Owner's Manual, and it's this guy named Steve Blank, and he was the college professor, I think, of a guy named Eric Ries, who wrote a book called The Lean Startup. And so what those two books tell you in 1,000 pages is basically when you're inventing a new technology and you're inventing a new product from scratch, all you have to go on is user feedback. And you have to solicit that user feedback. You have to get that user feedback, and you have to make it really easy for people to tell you where you suck. And then you take that feedback and you distill it down into actionable things that you can do to drive the product forward. And you do that in an iterative fashion rather than like just coding something up for 9 months and then releasing it and realizing you were all wrong about everything. And so we took all that to heart, and we hustled up maybe 100 people to use that first version that we paid that development shop to build. And we hustled these folks up by passing out door hangers, like flyers, all over Nashville, Tennessee. We passed out probably 100,000 of these goddamn things.
You got PTSD from this too.
Yeah, and I'll tell you another quick funny story. So here I am, I just sold like an 8-figure business, and now I'm passing out fucking door hangers, begging people.
Words to live by.
Begging people to use my shitty app for $27 to mow their yard. So that's another good thing about a business. It's humbling. It's what I needed at the time, to be honest. It was very humbling. But my two co-founders are out there, and we're passing out these door hangers, and in the same day, I got bit by a dog twice, and
oh my God.
like blood drawn, and I thought this sucks. This is no way to acquire users, but it was what we had to do at that time, at that level of the game, I guess you could say, to get 100 people, maybe 200 people to use it. And we needed those people to use it to get the feedback to understand how we were going to rebuild it. And when we talked to these folks, the fucking thing never worked. Like, somebody would sign up and the quotes, and then somebody would bid, but they wouldn't actually show up and mow the yard. Or they would mow the yard, but they'd do a shitty job. Or they'd mow the yard, but their lawnmower was too big, couldn't get through the gate in the back. Or it could get through the gate, but they left the gate open and let the dog out. Or they mowed the yard right after it rained and left grass all over like the sidewalk. Like a million things were going wrong. And so we would like be confronted with this negative feedback over and over and over again in people's kitchen tables and at Starbucks, and I know the inside of every Starbucks in Middle Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia, and Tampa, Florida, because those were the first 3 markets we launched. And so we would meet with these people, and they would tell us everywhere we sucked. But we never heard, I don't need this. Like, what we saw, they were like, man, this would be awesome if this actually did work. But we never saw apathy. We never heard like people say, it's kind of a neat thing, toy, but it doesn't really solve a problem for me. So we saw the fact that there was a pain point that we were trying to solve, and if we could just figure out how to solve the 999 things that go wrong systematically, that we might have something. And so that was enough to validation for us to keep going and learn how to build software. I became the world's shittiest front-end engineer, and my co-founder not to take anything away from him, but went to boot camp and he became a good enough back-end engineer, which is all we needed at the time.
I thought you were going to say the world's second shittiest front end or back end engineer.
He's a lot better. He's a much better developer than I ever was or ever will be. But he went to like an 8-month boot camp. The boot camp was $9,000, and he put that on his credit card. So he went to negative $9,000 to help pull us out of a ditch.
On that technology note, I mean, you mentioned the financial and like length of how much it took to develop this and for you guys to learn these skills and whatnot. But what percent of your time would you say, especially at the start, the first couple of years, was focused on the technology versus like the people part, like your homeowners and lawn care professionals part?
You're playing whack-a-mole in the early days of any business, and you're doing a bunch of things at the same time. So I always say that when you're starting a new business of any sort, you're doing 3 things at once. You're working in the business, which is just holding it together, and then it's whatever you can do to make sure the trains run on time. And then you're working on the business. You're developing systems, processes, routines, standard operating procedures, and that's building an actual business. And those two concepts are codified in the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Then there's the third thing that nobody talks about, but you're working on yourself. So you're doing those 3 things at the same time, at all times, running a business. Maybe to different degrees, and maybe like different. Maybe maybe in the early days, Monday through Fridays in the business, Saturdays on the business, and then Sundays on yourself. But you have to work on yourself. You have to learn skills. Like I had to learn how to write front-end code, and had to learn how to do product design, and learn how to do basic user interface design and basic SEO and all of this shit that nobody teaches you. You gotta carve out time to learn this stuff. And so for us, like, it was a balancing act between executing the actual like development of the technology, writing the code, and then listening to all of the things that people were telling us where we sucked, and distilling that into 1 or 2 objectives for that week to make the product better. It was basically triage. It was basically like, these are the 2 problems that we see the most on a daily basis that we have to focus on now, and not worry about anything else. One thing, we've been at this for a decade now. We're a 10-year overnight success.
I can hear the music montage in the background.
Yeah. And I mean, by no means are we anywhere near finished. We're still very much at day one, but at least, now we have 300,000 people using this thing. We're doing like $30 million a year in revenue. But the first couple years, we had hundreds of users if we were lucky. And I can say my point is, like, over a decade of doing this, I've never been at a loss for what we needed to focus the team on, because we just make it really, really seamless and frictionless for people to tell us what they're pissed off about. And so I back then I did customer support 7 days a week, 20 hours a day, maybe 18 hours a day. But if I wasn't in bed, I was answering tickets. And we used then and still use intercom.com. And Intercom has a nice mobile app. And so if you are sufficiently dedicated as a founder, you can have a direct pipeline to your upset customers 7 days a week through the Intercom mobile app. I mean, it will buzz you. It'll buzz you every single time somebody hits you up in the chat. And if you want, you can do that support yourself, and then you will never be at a loss for what you need to be working on, because your customers will tell you. And that's what we did. That's what we did. And I still do it now. I still do at least an hour a day of customer support, because there's this weird thing that happens when you're founding a business in the early days, and it gets worse as time goes on. There's a big gap that develops between founder logic and customer logic. And so the customer is looking at the problem from a certain, paradigm, a certain perspective, and you're looking at it from a totally different perspective. And so there's this gap that develops between customer logic and company logic. And so if you do your own customer support as much as you can, in the early days, and as you scale the business, it helps close that gap. And it helps you stay on track with building something that people want. And that's something I did then and still do now. We still use intercom.
That's awesome. I mean, you read my mind. I was going to ask how you make it frictionless, but that's like almost negative friction if it's a direct line to the CEO and the founders.
It's got to be, especially in the early days, it's got to be zero friction, customer to founder, and that means your cell number on the emails. The emails pop you right back on intercom or on your Gmail. It doesn't mean that your support, your transactional emails are no reply at company.com.
How'd you know my email?
You literally, like, I see this, founders of new startups, they have 12 customers or maybe 50, and their transactional email goes to a no response. Like, you need that feedback. It needs to hit you up. I promise you're not that busy as a new founder. And I promise you the highest leverage time you can spend is talking to customers in years 1, 2, and 3. And signing up for your own product to validate all of the stuff that they're telling you that needs to be fixed and improved. So that's a painful lesson I had to learn the hard way that I try to beat into people's heads.
I appreciate all the head beatings. So that's the relationship between customers and CEO. Another relationship that's essential to GreenPal is the relationship and these connections between the actual homeowners and the lawn care professionals that they end up hiring and working with through your app, through your marketplace. I guess between the two of those, what has been more of a challenge to like vet and get right and make sure, the right people are using your app like hassle-free?
Yeah, if we really have two customers, we have to make it easier to conduct business and get things done for both sides of the transaction. Because if vendors don't love it, if they're not making more money on the platform than they could off the platform with less headache, they're not going to use it. And if they don't use it, then there is no product or service for the homeowner. So it's a delicate balance that we have to get right. And at times we've overcorrected on one side or the other. And every marketplace deals with this. If Uber, for example, every consumer that uses Uber would love to get picked up in a Bentley that sits outside waiting for them for 25 minutes to take them to the airport for $7. Like, that's the consumer expectation.
That hits every possible touch point and desire.
But that's not it. That's not what the driver wants. The driver doesn't want to wait on your ass out there for longer than about a minute. And if you're lucky, the car doesn't smell like shit, and it's gonna be $45 to go to the airport. So the reality is, it's like you have to strike the balance between the two, and that's always been a challenge for us. I think the way we kind of been able to start off on the right foot was that I had 15 years of experience in the industry, so I kind of knew at least we were able to start off on first base. Based on what the tool set needed to be for service providers, what their psychology was, what their mentality is, what they're looking for, what their pain points are, and we solved for those, and we kind of got that right out of the gate. Now, that said, we still are always making improvements and trying to figure out a way. We really care about one thing. How do we make lawn care service providers, lawn pros, more money? That's it. Everything else dovetails off of that. How do we make them more money? How do we tee them more opportunities for new clients? How do we help them upsell? How do we help them retain their customers? How do we help them drive profitability with better route optimization? And solving for that really answers pretty much every question in our business. Make vendors more money, and how do we create efficiencies and do that? Is what we started off doing 10 years ago and what we're still doing today.
On the flip side of that, how do you still achieve that goal and stay behind that mission while making sure that the homeowners aren't feeling like, they're just paying too much for this and they're getting the results they like to see from this?
It's a self-correcting, I guess you could say, balance, because the reality is homeowners, they're not going to pay a premium for anything. Like, you can order an Uber and take a ride to the airport and it's going to be $20, or you can call an old-fashioned taxi company. It's going to be about the same price. So you're not going to pay a super premium for the convenience. No homeowner will. And so we have to solve for that. And so it's like, how do we drive down the cost of lawn mowing to where vendors can get through these stops quicker? They can win business easier, and they can do it at a more competitive price than in the analog world. And so one way we do that is, you normally as a lawn care service professional, you would get like 20 calls a day, and then you have to ride around and go look at these properties and give them estimates, and then like, work out and negotiate a price with them, and come back and mow the yard. We serve up these opportunities to vendors on the fly to where they can bid them without even going out to the property. So that's one way that we save them time, where they can quote 20 in like 5 minutes rather than 20 in a week. So that saves them time to where they can be a little more efficient. They can offer a little bit better pricing. The other thing is we attempt to drive as much route density as possible to where a vendor can do 10 stops in one zip code rather than 10 stops all over the metropolitan area. And the drive time really is a big cost driver in this service. Spending 15 minutes, and especially with gas, what it is today, really trying to drive those opportunities to where you already have customers, and enables you to be a little more competitive. And GreenPal actually is cheaper, even after the take rate in the marketplace. It actually is cheaper on average than just calling somebody off of like Angie's List or something like that.
So you've seen and led tremendous growth with GreenPal as well as Peachtree, and looking back at both of these businesses now, I know very much still plenty of work to do with GreenPal, but looking back at both of these, what would you say is the one main takeaway that this was key for driving growth in both these businesses?
Well, the first thing is there's a saying that first-time founders worry about product, and second-time founders worry about distribution. And so what I mean by that is, like, the first-time founder, and I've been guilty of this, obsesses over, what the product's going to look like or what the service is going to be. And this goes for any business. It might even be like if you're opening up a bakery. The person that loves to bake pies is opening up a bakery for the first time, and they're worried about what color is the awning, what does the recipes look like, what are we going to paint the floor, what kind of cool stuff we're going to have hanging on the wall. That's the product. Whereas if you've opened a bakery and maybe failed, or you opened a chain of bakeries and sold it, and now you're starting your second bakery gig or whatever, you're worried about, like, what's the marketing hook? What's the distribution? What's the social media strategy? What does the distribution look like? Because that's all I care about. If I can't get people to come in the front door, it doesn't matter how cool the bakery is. And so that is a lesson I've had to learn the hard way, is that if you build it, they will not come. You have to innovate on product, and you also have to innovate on growth and distribution. And you have to figure out, like, in the early days, how are you going to get people to discover this service or product that you have, and what is that actual, like, execution of that strategy going to look like, and then setting aside time for that. And I wasted years in my first business and years in my second business under emphasizing those activities. It took me like 5 years in the lawn mowing business to realize that I wasn't selling I wasn't a lawn mowing company. I was a sales company, and that really what we were good at was developing business and prospecting business, pitching new business, and closing business. I had a sales team of like 6 people, and I was the sales manager for many years. Yeah, we did a great job at landscape maintenance services also, but that was table stakes. Really, what we were best in market at was sales. And now with GreenPal, we are the preeminent, like, the best marketer of lawn mowing services in the United States. Not that that's saying a lot. It's not a real sexy industry, but we are.
Hey, it's sexy. It's sexy. Don't be humble.
We spent a decade learning how to drive traffic to the property, how to be where people are looking for. When you're in Lincoln, Nebraska, and you're looking for a lawn mowing service, how is GreenPal in that conversation? And so while we're really good at helping you find a great lawn mowing service at a great price, really none of that shit matters because we have to be the best in the world at distribution. Product and all of that stuff is table stakes. You also have to innovate on growth and distribution.
Distribution is rather key in the podcasting world as well, because if your podcast can't be found, your podcast can't be listened to. It's very tough to do that. If you need help getting your podcast on all the key podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Good Pods if you're looking for a recommendation network like that, as well as having a fantastic set of marketing materials to share out for your podcast and attract current and new listeners as well. Hit me up at Maximax I can help you with all the above, and I'll throw a dad joke in there every now and then too. I'll stumble over my throwing in of dad jokes, but every now and then I'll try to make you laugh as well. Hit me up at MaximaxPodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. Now, let's get unusual with Bryan in a segment I'm calling Unusual with Bryan. Let's get a little bit unusual. We're going to dive into you as a person and your personality, some pet peeves, quirks, weird talents you have. You can tie them to the business if you want, or they could just be totally about you, not tied to the business at all. So first one is, what's your biggest pet peeve?
I hate when people are late. I think it's disrespectful and it's self-centered. But then again, I read an article the other day that people that are late live longer because they're not really worried about anything. They don't give.
Well, yeah, they're late till the funeral party.
They don't give a fuck. They just show up whenever they're ready. And so maybe I'm wrong.
That's got to be an interesting study. Who knows? We'll check it out eventually. What is a quirk you have? Something a little quirky about your personality that your family, friends, somebody calls you out for, but it's who you are.
You could probably glean this off. What I hope anybody gets from hearing me do a podcast interview like this one is that if that guy can do it, I can do it. I'm not great at anything. I'm pretty average at a lot of shit. So I guess a quirk is I don't like people that waste my time. I don't. I'm almost kind of like a jerk about it, and I just try to get shit done. And I'm not particularly good at anything other than just being consistent and getting shit done. And I don't like people that stand in the way of that. And so I guess one of my quirks is I don't suffer that at all, almost to a point of rudeness. And maybe I should work on that. But that's me being a bit, I guess, self-aware.
Yeah, I mean, you're such a dick. No, I'm just kidding. So, no, but I think that's the kind of jack of all trades, but only to a certain extent, and the getting shit done ability is really, really good for being an entrepreneur. And but that stuff is what's driven you and your businesses to kind of get to this level. And it obviously. You've tried out a lot of different skills, but clearly you're hiring a ton of people, you're working with a ton of people, you've been able to recognize when you shouldn't be spending time on a certain area and somebody else is better suited to do that.
I think being 80-20 good at a lot of different things is particularly helpful when you're in levels 1, 2, and 3 of the game. And that's the hardest part, I think, is getting through. If you want to look at business as Super Mario Brothers, the first 3 or 4 levels are the hardest to get through in business. And I think if you're half-ass good at a lot of different things, that can be what helps you get through that stuff, because you're going to be doing a lot of it yourself anyways. And then you can then delegate to people who are a lot better than you are at these things, because you know a little bit about it. Every time I've tried to delegate something that I didn't know anything about, it's never worked out.
That's interesting. You hear so many people talk about delegation, but not working out. What do you mean by that?
Well, for instance, when we tried to pay a dev shop to build what we thought GreenPal should be, when none of us knew how to code, we pissed away 9 months and $150,000. The 9 months is probably much more valuable than the $150,000. And so that was a big waste, and it almost tanked the company. We almost gave up after that. And it was because we tried to delegate software development when none of us knew how to develop software. It's kind of like if you were going to open a new restaurant, and maybe a 5-star restaurant, and you yourself as the founder aren't interested in recipes, you've never cooked shit, You don't know any chefs, but yet you still open the restaurant.
You've never been to a restaurant.
Yeah. Or you're not a tinkerer. You don't love to cook at home. Or you've never like tried to invent a new recipe or something, and yet you're gonna be in the restaurant business. And you're not passionate about developing new recipes and all these things. Like that's kind of how stupid it was for us to try to build a tech business and delegate the software development when we didn't know how to develop software. So we had to get like dangerous, like 80-20 good. And then we could delegate it. So that's how it's worked out for me. You got to be like half-assed good at these things before you try to delegate them.
I'm envisioning like the believe sign from Ted Lasso, or like the Notre Dame, like play like a champion today, except just be half-assed good at some shit.
Yeah. I'll throw another video game metaphor at you that helps me make sense of the business world. Super Mario Kart. You had all these different drivers, and they were all like really good at one thing. You had Bowser, who was the fastest top end, but he was slow off the line. Toad, which handled really good. You had Yoshi, which also handled but had a little bit better acceleration. Princess was the fastest off the line, had shitty top end. And then you had Mario. Mario was like half-assed good at all these things. He wasn't the best driver for like the hard courses, but if you were first like trying to get to know the game, he was the best driver for you to select, because he was pretty good at all this stuff. And so you kind of want to be Mario when you're starting a new business. You want to be half-assed good at probably 20 different things.
I feel like you might have played some Mario Kart in your day, because that's the most detailed breakdown of the skills of that all-star team I've ever heard.
I loved that game growing up.
It was great. Well, Mario, I'll give him full ass on the mustache, though, because that's iconic. And then speaking of unique skills like that, what's a weird talent you have? Something besides Mario Kart or cooking that you're pretty good at, but it doesn't really impact your business. You just have a knack for it.
Man, so I wish somebody 20 years ago would have gotten me into martial arts sooner in my life. So I'm 42 years old, and I started, I don't know why, I think I saw a special, like a documentary on Krav Maga, and I thought, that's some cool shit. I'm gonna try to learn that. I don't know why, but I did, and I hired a coach, and so I started working with him, and then I got into Muay Thai boxing and did just American boxing, and I'm not like a really good fighter or anything, but I've gotten decent at kickboxing and in Krav Maga, which actually saved my life traveling one time. But it's something weird that I like, and that has actually saved my life.
Let's fight it out through the last part, which is rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Let's do it.
All right, let's get wild. You are, as we speak, you are recording this from Chile. So that's just a little bit of an example of your passion for travel and kind of running this business around the world. But what is your favorite hidden gem spot you've ever traveled to that maybe not many people know how beautiful it is?
There's an island in the Caribbean that not a lot of people know about called San Andres, and it's actually Colombian territory, but it's like kind of near the coast of Nicaragua. It's like got Maldives style like beaches and water, and I was really surprised by it. Super cheap, but you can't get there from the United States. You have to be in Peru or Colombia. The only flights to it. That is a really, really cool place that if anybody's just like going around backpacking around South America, that's a cool place to check out. I'm in Chile right now, and I really want to go out to Easter Island, but it's closed due to COVID. I like those little islands that just seem to be like removed from everything.
You're an avid book reader, especially business books. What if there was only one business book you could read for the rest of your life, and you had to read it once a year minimum? What would that book be, and why?
This is a good question, because sometimes I started reading really, really heavily in my late 20s, early 30s, and I wish I had started it in my early 20s. And I would read everything I get my hands on, and it really helped me. It helped me like level up my thinking and help me look at things differently. But now that I've probably read, I don't know, maybe a book a month over the last 10 years, so a few hundred books. Now I'm starting to think that it's not ideal to read everything. It's to like have 10 things and then just reread those. And so that's what I'm starting to do now. And so the main book that I get the most value of, and I try to read every year, is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. It's not necessarily like a 100% business book, but there's so many things in that book that dovetail into effective business that have been foundational to how I've built GreenPal. And I wish I had that. I don't know when that book came out. Probably 20 years ago. I wish I have read it like every year over the last 20 years. I still do read it every year. And then I also try to like mix in like an Audible version, because it's a fun book to listen to. And Dr. Stephen Covey reads it. He passed away a few years ago, but he reads it, and that guy was a saint.
What is your favorite, hands down, restaurant in Nashville?
Ooh, the Nashville food scene is really, 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 really blown up, and we're known for, I guess our thing is hot chicken.
Yeah, my mouth is on fire just thinking. I've had some really hot renditions.
Listen, some of that shit is too hot.
Yeah, well said.
Some of it's too hot. But there's Prince's Hot Chicken in North Nashville, which is like the old school black-owned restaurant that is like those guys were they were making hot chicken before it got super popular. It's the best in town. So yeah, that's my favorite. That's my favorite restaurant for anybody who doesn't live in Nashville, who's looking for a Nashville experience. I like it. Prince's Hot Chicken.
My buddy Mark and I visited our friend John in Nashville. I don't know, this is probably 4 years ago at this point. He took us to Hattie B's, and one of the locations that we literally sat out. We waited in line in the parking lot for like 45 minutes on a 100+ degree day. It was really good, but they weren't kidding when it was hot, and it was hot, and it was hot on top of hot. Yeah. And last one, what is your favorite course, or racetrack in Mario Kart?
Oh, wow. God, I can't remember the name of it, but it was the one that was like it floated in the air and you could fall off at
Rainbow Road?
Yeah, Rainbow Road.
Yeah. Oh, man.
You had to have Toad on that one because he could handle like hell around those curves. You didn't want Mario on that course. Maybe you did. I don't know.
Maybe. He'd be pretty good at everything, but just not that good at everything.
Yeah.
No, but that's great. That one was, if you were young enough, that one was intimidating because it's you could fall off pretty easily. But great stuff, great memories. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for all you do and your multiple businesses and your love of lawn care, smells. No, I'm just kidding. No, but for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom and advice with us today. If you're interested in checking out GreenPal, you can go to greenpal.com. You could download the app on the app stores. Anything else you want to shout out from social media or just contact standpoint?
Every now and then, folks hit me up that listen to my interviews, and Instagram's the best place to reach me. You can find me at Bryan M. Clayton. Just drop me a DM there, and I'll hit you back.
Perfect. Final thoughts. It could be a quote, a line, whatever you want. Take us home here. Stage is yours.
I listened to an interview the other day with Mark Andreessen, who is like a famous venture capitalist now, and he's the guy who basically invented the modern web browser. They invented what we know as the web browser today back in like 1992. And he talks about when he moved out to Silicon Valley in 1992. This is the dawn before the World Wide Web, and they're writing the web browser. And the feeling and sentiment that he had and his contemporaries had was, we missed it. We're too late. And all the opportunities were locked up, and that there was no way to break in, and that they were too late. They missed the explosion. And that's what they thought. And they almost moved back home to it was somewhere in Illinois. But they stuck it out. And how hilarious. This was like minute one of day one of the explosion of the internet, and this guy was part of maybe you could consider him the founder, the father of the modern web. Anyway, so he says that he felt that they missed it, and how silly is that looking backwards. So I think what I took away from that is that you always feel like that. You always feel like you missed it. You always feel like, oh, I'm too late. I'm too late to the game on the gig economy or crypto or SaaS or construction or real estate or whatever. And the fact is it always gets bigger. It always gets bigger. The opportunities always compound, and you didn't miss it. You got to get in the game, because only when you're in the game can you win.
It's in the game. Shout out John Madden. Thank you so much, Bryan Clayton, for sharing your sensational GreenPal and Peachtree stories and all the wisdom you've learned in your entrepreneurship and Mario Kart journey. And thank you, wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow this podcast, the Wild Business Growth Podcast, on your favorite podcast listening app. And tell a friend about the podcast, and then challenge them to who can mow the lawn faster, whether it's your lawn or somebody else's lawn. You might get kicked off the lawn, or you might just keep doing it quicker. Who knows? You can also find us on Good Pods, where there are awesome podcasts and podcast recommendations/people. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!